I wanted to talk to you, first of all, because Eurozine, where you're an editor, you're basically a journalist, is a participatory medium. It's online, it takes in all the countries of Europe, and you talk a lot also about the youth issues, so welcome to the Voters 2024. How important you think that in times like this, we are here standing on Austria's national days in front of the parliament, we saw protesters.
We're getting hit by a police car.
And against that. So how important is participation today for the youth, and what kind of participation?
So I think I would guess that the reason you asked this is because we both feel very strongly that youth representation in mainstream media is sorely lacking. It's very, like, almost in the negative, right? It has professional elements to it simply because of the path of a journalist by the time somebody gets a voice, the path of an editor by the time somebody gets to make decisions about who gets a voice, who gets to write, speak, etc. That has a very strong sort of pathway to it, which requires you to spend some time there. But also because we have been more or less blind to this issue with technological change. And speaking as the editor of a magazine that is read by primarily people under 25, it is kind of counterintuitive. So you see that young people do consume media through different technology and different platforms to what you're used to. But frankly, our generation, with I think
plus, minus,
more or less, also doesn't consume media like our parents used to, or even our aunts and uncles. So it has always been in a transitional space, and somehow we're still blind to this. Probably also because it's a quick change. I think that if you want to build up your audience, and you need an audience to rely on to keep you steady and autonomous, you have to be mindful about how to engage these young readers, viewers, listeners, because this is the age up to like 25 to 30 when they develop their habits, and then it's going to be more instilled, it's going to change harder, right?
So what are these subjects of today, of youth of today? What is that something which is very pressing for them and which they see, we can walk now because there will be some speeches, I think, which they see are not represented out there somewhere in public life?
So I think the most obvious is that young voices, speakers, and authors are underrepresented heavily. That's a problem with education, that's a problem with the paths in media work, whether you can rely on it or not. But in terms of topics, in our experience, and of course Eurozine is a very specific example, we have long form, very detailed articles about deep issues.
In today's fast world, we'll talk about it later.
But the thing is, under 25 people are interested in this. It's not that they only watch TikTok where they learn social theory sometimes, so I'm not even being cynical about this. It is that they are much more interested in social issues, I think, than two clusters up. So people between 35 and 45, in my experience, just seeing the readership statistics, are way less invested in those. They're more invested in current affairs. Young people are a little bit less interested in those, at least in our readership, and they are much more interested in long-lasting undercurrents, the big trends that define their lives and what they can expect. They're also very interested, of course, in technology, but less in technology in terms of, how is this going to change us, but more in terms of where's the potential. And I think that's understandable. Like, you don't want to think about your life all the time like going downhill from some perceived glorious past, right? So they're interested in how to handle things. They want to develop their critical reading skills. I also speak as, I don't teach a whole lot of people, but I do teach a couple of university students, and what I see there is dedication, but there is also a feeling of a certain, not hopelessness, but sort of lacking a true connection with a bunch of generations up. Because they feel like they don't necessarily match the expectations that are put on them. They don't necessarily can afford the things that are expected of them. So you're expected to intern for a while. You can do that if you don't have to earn money, right? You're expected to do this and this and this while you're studying. You can only do that if you don't have to work night shifts. So there's always like a hard criteria there behind what many of them often feel that they just can't really deliver.
Wow, this is a lot that you put out, and very important, I think, and fundamental things. So out of this misunderstanding across generations, basically, and something which I see boiling within the youth, which is they are really very, what you said, interested in life around them. How do we look at the democratic model as we knew it? You know, our parents and us, you know, we maybe understand political parties go out and vote every 4 years. Why would a 16 to 18-year-old person today go out and vote, I don't know, in 2024 European elections? What are the triggers that will motivate them to understand that this kind of life, which at the end will bring, I don't know, the policy of their states or of Europe out? Why would they be interested in this kind of party politics, let's say?
Yeah, I don't think I can respond to that fairly in terms of like a pan-European answer, because we don't really have a pan-European polity. That's the core of the problem, and it relates to not having a shared public sphere, which, you know, draws a long way from here. But, you know, just drawing in on the children in my care, ranging, you know, 12 to 12, 15, and 17. They're very interested in politics. They live in Hungary, so they are furious all the time, and they feel bad about being furious, but they feel this helplessness. The main things on their minds are obviously education, climate change, and they're sort of like mentally prepping themselves for something that they can't quite foresee. They feel like they want to act, and they feel often let down, not necessarily by the adults around them, but like the adult society altogether. And they really, really think a hell of a lot, especially for teenagers, about what they're going to make a living from. And we're talking about lifelong learning and choose a vocation that you really love for a certain class of children, of course, not below a certain social standing. But they don't really know, and I think they feel this precariousness and this uncertainty. For Eastern Europeans, obviously, it's migration, the first thing on their minds. Most Hungarian students who apply to universities, not most, but a good proportion of them don't even apply within the country. And it is true, I think, as a trend more or less of Serbia, Croatia, Slovakia, etc. You know this. So I think it's that they really want a perspective of being able to grow down their roots, but they don't see how that's going to work. And it's both kind of heartbreaking and both very interesting that they have a much better grasp of reality around them than my generation did. I went to elementary school in 1990. We were the first class to not learn Russian anymore, and we were told that the world is yours and everything's going to be great, and this is a free country now, and you gradually had to learn the caveats to that. And I don't think we really had like a good understanding of what awaits us. They have, and I think they have better ideas, or like better ideas for solutions or alternatives too. But I guess it's also, we really have to be a bit more trusting with these children than our societies are.
I think that is also the problem, because, you know, as in every historical cycle, you know, things change, culture changes, circumstances change, so every generation basically has its own story to bring to this world. So the question of trust, I think, that you've mentioned is of key importance for keeping the social fabric. You work with kids a lot. You do the workshops and journalism also. You are like teaching.
Well, we are starting a project.
The project. So how to build this trust, or how to give them our trust, because I think it's maybe time to let go the world to them.
Yeah.
I think I'm very hopeful towards them, even though, I don't quite understand what's going on.
I don't know if you're originally also a pedagogue, but it sometimes comes with that. So it is a methodological question, whether you imagine raising people and education and teaching, or just child rearing as like a one-way process, or if you understand it as a communication back and forth. And there's a hell of a lot that you don't know that they help you realize about so many things. And I think in a technological environment where there's such a huge division between generations, we are basically at their mercy.
Yeah.
Like they explain stuff to us, which is fine. It's not something to fret about. This is like a bonding opportunity between generations. So that's why I think, there should be a bit more trust. I also am not quite so enthusiastic about this classical canon of culture, which is of course always changing. We know this. There's no like fixed set of knowledge that you definitely have to have about culture, literature, history, etc. What we know about history is in permanent flux. So if you don't imagine this as a box that they have to just be, waterboarded by, then it becomes a much more positive exchange. And I think they're aware that their ability to acquire knowledge and their ability to research and judge for themselves as critical readers is probably going to be much better than my generation's was, where, let's be frank, so the current 30-somethings up to 40-somethings, especially in the former Soviet bloc, I think a very strong blend of nihilism paired with very general neoliberalism has done us a lot of bad. And also in terms of journalism, I still see it to this day, like platforming, collaboration, and standing up for ourselves professionally is sorely lacking in whole clusters of people.
So you said you have trust in their critical thinking. We today saw a lot of, movements being organized online. They are globalized. They can kind of be this and there on the square, fighting for the cause, this and that cause, which is some kind of participation we didn't have. What do you think? How or are they resilient on disinformation, on messing up people's minds that we are basically experiencing today in Europe as a whole, with disinformation campaigns, with war in Ukraine? So how do you think their perception of things looks like in this kind of world?
It's incredibly hard to tell, but so what we know and what we should keep in mind is that generations are not worse or better after each other. Neither is technology inherently positive or negative, right? So it's what they get the chance to make of it. I think that at this point, maybe simply being native to a technology that is still being formulated does give current day very young adults and children some advantage, but it doesn't give them all that advantage. So it's not late 90s, early 2000s internet when the few early adapters kind of could make a head start. What I see as a core problem is that on the individual level and on the professional sort of class level, there are way fewer opportunities for stability. You can make it big, or you can just be left there. Yeah. And what I think would help a lot for this generation to develop its own voice and its own sort of immune system against disinformation, which has always been prevalent, is to provide accessible means of people to make a professional leap. Don't make it 1 out of 10,000. Make it 1 out of 10 who tries it or more. So make funding available, make stable, trustworthy paths available within media, make education more thorough. And my pet peeve that I always come back to this, there's no proper education for the editorial procedure, including how inclusion and equity is realized within editorial decisions, how certain topics and certain people do actually get through to representation. And this really should change. And I think there's not just room to improve, there's all the opportunity that we need. So what we would need is less centralization in the funding, and if nation states or governments decide to make the leap and dedicate resources, please don't hand out a bunch of other gigantic funds to the existing monopolies. That's not really helping anyone. It has to be an ecosystem, and these kids have to find their place in that. And unless they do, they're not going to be able to integrate into this existing system. So it's either they develop a whole separate understanding and culture, and then we're left behind, or we find a way to somehow make this plane a little bit more equitable and leveled for them.
And for the end, I have to ask you, you're a mom
Yeah.
of a 12-year-old. How are you coping?
Well, it's weird. Like, they read the news and then we sit down around the table. Of course, everybody, like my 11-year-old doesn't read the same thing. She more hears about them. And then the 15 and the 17-year-old, they read news and they hear about them, and the kids hear from the parents and others. And we sit around the table and they're fuming and they're filled with anger, but they're not angry kids. My daughter is, but the boys aren't. And they're so angry and they feel like they can't really do much about this, and they feel really let down. And sometimes, living in Hungary, sometimes the answer is when they ask, so why does it make sense for them? It's like, it doesn't. We don't really live in a reality. And I'm really sorry to say, but it's on us very much to change it for you, but unfortunately it's partially also on you. And I really hate to put that weight on teenagers or even young adults. It shouldn't be entirely on them, but they have to participate. And they're doing that. There's gigantic protests out there in the streets organized by high schoolers. That's not a thing that we could imagine
in Hungary.
Back when, even when I was a university student, you were considered a cretin if you were involved with anything regarding politics apart from career politics. So this has changed. Zeitgeist change, and maybe this is a better one.
Hopefully, this zeitgeist will soon become their zeitgeist, because I don't think that this reality is maybe their reality. Reka, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For this conversation, and good luck.
You too.
And hi. You speak English?
Yeah.
How old are you? 14. And how is life?
In Vienna, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Music, what kind of music do you listen?
I listen to hip-hop.
Hip-hop?
Yeah, hip-hop.
Raf Kamora? No, what else?
Like rap.
Rap?
Yes.
Okay, good luck.